Hi everybody, welcome in. Today I want to talk about surrendering to the war. Are you ready to surrender to the war? That's the question. So only you can decide that. And today we're going to be talking about that in this video. So stay tuned to the end. I'm going to be sharing a little trick with y'all at the very end. So stay tuned with me as we go into this journey of talking about surrendering and how surrendering to the war is all we really need to do here. So I want to start by talking about a very famous kind of Christian quote, something that's used in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to just start by reading this to you because makes a lot of sense to what we'll be talking about here today. So if I can, I'll go ahead and read this to you. It says, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." So it may seem like a very simple prayer, but this prayer is very powerful. It's very profound. It's very deep, and it may not sound like it. So let's read it again. It says, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change." There's going to be things that are seemingly going to seem outside of your control. The courage to change the things I can. There's different parts of our lives. Sometimes we think that we're doing this thing and we think that we have all the power and control to do that. That's where we have to realize that the personal self does not have that control and relinquish that control to our higher selves, our higher power. So it says, the courage to change the things that I can. So we're still there. The courage to change the things that I can. There will be things that you can change. And when you are tuned into that higher power, there's going to be more wiggle room there for the things that you can change. And you're going to be awakened to those things that you can change. And there's quite a bit there that you have been neglecting. And that is why we are in war right now. So it says, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the greatest thing. The wisdom to really know the difference between those things that we can change and those things that we can't. And where we're coming from a place of personal, limited self, and where we're coming from a place of absolute, divine self. So there's two aspects within each and every one of us. And so this is kind of speaking to those two aspects of us. And there's aspects of us that appear in our reality that we cannot change. And as we become more wise to know the difference between those two things, we can really begin to make the change in our own life to really end that war that we're talking about here. Now, this may be a very interesting topic for you. I'm kind of making this topic based on my other two videos that I made talking about judgment. Now, this is all coming around the time of us really having a lot of turmoil and what looks like war and trouble in the outside world, what's happening throughout this appearance of the universe right now on our earth. On earth right now, there's all kinds of things. There's floods, there's fires, there's wars in various parts of the countries and various parts of this earth. There's suffering in different ways. There's oppression. There's many different things that are bubbling up and coming to the surface to be released, to be seen, to be experienced, to be dealt with. Things that may be from the past, from a long time ago, but they still have to be dealt with. And so we're going to be delving into that and how these things come up. And I've talked about that in my last two videos. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend watching those two videos prior to this one. So I will link those in my description, and I will also pin them to the top comment down below. So we're going to kind of pick up from there, from where we left off, where there's all this releasing of different things coming up to the surface to be released. Okay, so what we can do is we can feel into these things, we can allow them to be released. But there's also this aspect of learning from these things so that these things don't get repeated in history or within ourselves. Because what we notice is that there is this pattern within humans, within humanity, within the history of humanity, for things to cycle, for things to repeat. And that's very typical, very normal. But we can break out of cycles, and that is what awakening is. It breaks you out of all of these conditioned cycles. So the only way to really get to that awakening is surrender. So we're going to get there, but prior to getting there, we're going to talk a little bit about this and how really this is just a process that's unfolding here. And so it's a process that's unfolding within history. It's a process that's unfolding within you as your individual self that you're appearing as. So within the personal self, there's going to be things that are bubbling up to be healed, to be dealt with, to be seen. And so we deal with those things, whether that's going through counseling or, some kind of spiritual aspect to it or whatever. We heal those things. We come to wholeness within ourselves. And those patterns no longer repeat themselves. Now, if you notice an unhealthy person, a person prior to going to get therapy or whatever, they're usually repeating cycles. They're going in these cycles that are very predictable. You can see them get into relationships and you can almost predict how that's going to play out because you have the evidence of their prior relationships. And so they're kind of in these loops of repeating cycles. And so that has been happening in humanity as well. We have been repeating cycles. And so there's been a lot of history, a lot has gone on, but a lot of it has been these repeated cycles of really this kind of fighting, taking, and keeping for oneself. Now that's very similar to the fighting that and the turmoil that happens within a person. The caterpillar stage, the very early stages of human life, we're really taking in, we're trying to keep, we're trying to make ourselves bigger, grander, appear like we're successful, like we're grand. So we're taking, consuming. And so same thing for the early history of humanity. It was a lot of taking, consuming, gaining power, gaining land, gaining this, gaining that. And so that was the caterpillar stage. And so then there's this kind of like dormant stage that we've talked about with the cocoon. Now the same thing can happen within humanity as a collective. It kind of goes dormant. It's like that stuff seems to have been forgotten. Everything seems to be kind of calm. But what you don't see there is there's a lot going on underneath the surface. A lot that hasn't been dealt with, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. Even though it may not be expressing itself in the physical, in what we can see, it's still happening in the unseen. So just like the human, we can appear like we're doing well. We can appear that we're going to work, that we're smiling, that we're at the gym, that we're eating, that we're playing with our friends, that we're doing fun things. But inside, a person can be very hurt. A person can be suffering. A person can be in depression. And so the exterior, everything appears like somewhat okay. But there's a lot going on in there until one day, what happens? Everything that was bottled up, everything that was suppressed, everything that was bypassed, it can no longer be bypassed. There is no bypassing here. It will be dealt with. So what happens? It bubbles, it bubbles, it bubbles until poof, it explodes. And what happens? We have conflict. We have war, whether that's within ourselves or within humanity or within different regions and areas of the world. We have that. But if it's anywhere, if we have that conflict occurring anywhere, whether that's within ourselves or we're experiencing it or identifying it in our outside world, that means it is directly happening within us. Okay? Wherever we're identifying it, it's a signal that there is conflict within us and there's things that we haven't dealt with. Now, these things could be very, very old. It could be things that were not even part of your upbringing, your life, but somehow they're there. These things don't seem to make a lot of sense to most people. They don't seem to make a lot of sense in general. They don't need to make sense because everything's going to come back and point towards you. We can go into talking about ancestors, lineage, DNA, all of these things. But at the end of the day, all there is what's happening, and that's you. So everything's going to come back to you. So we can just go ahead and skip the middleman and all of these other things and start working with this. So we're going to have to get to the space where we can surrender, where we can just say enough is enough and let it go. And just realize it's okay to fail. It's okay to change our mind. It's okay to start new. It's okay that we made mistakes. It's okay that our history doesn't align to who we are today. see, humanity as a whole, we can all collectively agree to say those things. Now, I was saying it on a personal level, but do you see how these are the same? In humanity, we can also agree that we have made mistakes, that there have been times in humanity where we have agreed to do certain things and thought that certain things were okay, where later we changed our mind, and where things are relative, where in some regions, in some areas, this is okay, and other places it's not okay. And really give ourselves grace over the fact that everything is so changing. And what's right today and what we agree to today can be completely different tomorrow. And that's just life. That's just how it's happening. Can we agree to drop the judgment? Can we agree to see past these things and really just see what's happening here? Look at the whole picture. So instead of getting lost in the trees, really see the forest. You know, there's a lot more here, okay? So there's a lot more going on here, and we're getting stuck on the small stuff. So what we really have to do, and what happens in the personal journey that's happening also within the collective, within the absolute and the meta version of everything, it's all happening at once, is that we're fighting with ourselves. And what's happening is we are failing, and we are going against our true nature, which is our heart, which is our sacred divine self, which is everything and nothing, which is something you can't identify at all. I say heart, but that's a metaphorical thing. What this is can't be placed. It's not within your body. It's not constant in any space. This just is. And when we can tap into that, everything changes. Our whole view of this life, of this earth, of what's happening here completely flips and turns upside down. So this is an opening right now in humanity and within ourselves as whatever individual you're expressing, that things are going to shift into a very different way. So I like to look at things a lot of times, the way I look at it in my mind is in this masculine and feminine way. Now, I don't always like to talk about that stuff because a lot of people get hung up on the masculine and feminine aspect of things, thinking it has something to do with gender or sex or something like that. But it doesn't. We all hold masculine and feminine energy within ourselves. And so within ourselves, we have a little bit more of one or the other. Generally, females hold a little bit more feminine and males hold more masculine. So anyhow, we can see the rules playing out in the general typical stereotypical roles. You know, now things are definitely changing a lot more, but let's think about the stereotypical ways, not to judge them, just because we're trying to kind of understand what's happening here. So generally, the masculine is the one that's the organizer, the doer, the one that's out there gathering, creating things, getting the money, bringing in the money, doing all of this stuff, basically doing all of the work. Like we even see today, you know, a man going out to work to bring the money home. And what happens? Let's say it's a stay-home mom or something like that. We're thinking more traditional. The female, what they do is when the masculine brings in all of these things that they've brought in from their structure that they've created and their discipline, the female or the feminine will go ahead and disperse it and create life, go into creation and imagination, decorating the home, making it beautiful, creating lovely meals out of just some few ingredients, you know, dressing up the kids, thinking of beautiful things to do with the kids, taking beautiful pictures, creating beautiful games. So with all of the resources and things that the masculine energy brings in, the feminine creates a flow, creates beauty, creates life with it. And so there's these two parts that are always playing out in life. And so the same thing happens in the collective. And so what's been happening in this world, in this earth, what's happening or appearing to have happened is that we've been into this real masculine role of, you know, these wars and taking and really being very masculine, patriarchal. And you can even see that in who's in leadership and the way that things run and work. So it's been a more masculine world for quite a bit of time. And, you know, for the time that we have in recorded human history, it's been that way. And so what we're beginning to see is that now, okay, all of that has happened. The masculine, just like in the typical male and female relationship, has brought in all the resources, has created a good structure, has created systems where it has and brings in resources, It has a system that's, working, every day. And it's bringing in enough resources to provide for everything. So there's the money, the food, all of that stuff. So all of that is there. It's now here and delivered. But what's missing is that strong feminine energy that's going to take those resources and really create something beautiful. So what's happening is all of those resources, everything that the masculine has brought into the earth, is just sitting there or is being used by the masculine to create more masculine programming figures, things that are running this earth. So we need a little bit more feminine in there. We need a little bit more flow, a little bit more beauty to kind of work with those resources and create more beauty, more ease. And as you can see, things have definitely been changing. People are working less. People are working more from home. People are spending more time with their families. While people think that there's more separation happening, there's equally the same happening for connection. So it may appear this way, but it's all happening just like it would for your good, for the collective's good. Everything's always happening for everybody's good. So all of these things are happening, but they're actually creating more connection. They appear like they're creating more division, but what happens is there has to be division. There has to be separation for life or creation or the feminine to come in. So what's seen here is like, um, it's seen here that there has to be separation. There has to be something that separates, like the two DNA strands. There has to be things that separate like this. I'm seeing a visual of separation. And then life comes in. And when we separate, when the nothingness or absolute separates, that's when life comes in. And that's where we get all of the movement and beauty. So right now, what's happening is that things are switching. We're having all these things bubble up to be expressed, to be released, to be dealt with. But what's happening in turn is what you gain from releasing that is more of the feminine comes in. So you're going to have more beauty, more bliss, more love, more relaxation. You're going to be experiencing a different shift here, even within things as big as politics and things like that. You're going to see more female leaders. You're going to see people and things switching their ways of being. So where they maybe were more patriarchal, they're going to switch to be more matriarchal. And so you're going to begin to see that within religions, within countries and stuff like that, because there's kind of like this polarity shift that happens every so often, and it's ready to happen because the masculine has collected so much. It's done such a great job. It's done all of this, and so now things switch. And so this is how life keeps going. This is just how it goes. And the same thing happens between the male and the female within sexuality, if you think of it that way. So it's playing out everywhere. So if we just pay attention to these things, we can make sense of it, and it's not as bad as we think. Everything is actually happening for everyone's greater good. And I know it's not easy to see that from a limited personal perspective, but if we zoom out, if we take a meta view out, then we can really see, oh, this is how it's always been, and this is how this happens. These are just the cycles that happen. Everything's always happening in cycles, and this is just another one of those cycles. It's just the masculine has done so much. Now it's time to flip. It's just what happens. Okay, so I wrote down some notes and things just in case there was anything I wanted to kind of make sure I hit on. So I just wrote things down like the thoughts in your head, the struggle you hold internally, the search. Those are the things you just want to let go. So when we're talking about surrendering, what is something that we can actually do? So we want to let go of those thoughts in our head. We want to let go of those things that are holding us back. So we want to surrender. We just want to give up already. Let it go. So the trick that I wanted to kind of share with you is just to do it, to be exhausted, to get exhausted, to fall down, to cower, to just let yourself be miserable, let yourself fail, let yourself feel that failure. Accept that it is just foolish to fight. Give up the fight. See that the fight isn't going anywhere. See that the fight isn't helping. So there's this movie, and I always have this visual in my head, and I share it with other people. I'm gonna take a drink. I got a little bit of hot chocolate here. Um, it's a Natalie Portman movie called Annihilation. And so this movie, towards the end, she's fighting this entity. It's, I think, like an alien or something. And so she's fighting it. And when she realizes that the entity is literally moving the same way she is. So whatever movement she does, the alien does. And when she fights it, it fights her with the same force. And so she only really realizes this when she's fighting against it, and she gets so tired and hurt that she stops. She becomes very weak, and the entity becomes weak as well and just kind of holds her. And so she realizes this, and then it just becomes like this thing of her trying to kind of relax, release, and just run. And so that's what she did. But I like that visual because that's really what we're doing when we're fighting against something or someone or whatever, anything other. We're actually in fight with ourselves. And I like to picture that Natalie Portman fighting this entity that's literally doing the same thing. Because that's what happens when we're fighting with somebody. Really look at this. You're just fighting yourself. So at some point you have to surrender and say, I give up this fight. There is no point fighting this fight. Every time I fight this fight, I only hurt myself. So give up the fight. Let it go. Get so exhausted and tired of the fight that you give it up and you don't go back to that fight. Throw in the towel. So that's where we want to get to, and that's why I'm energetically focusing in on that. That's the energy we want to get to. Okay, so this is another thing that's kind of something that I've heard before. It says, in the hands of your enemy, you are surrendered to God. So when you're in the hands of your enemy, you are surrendered to God. How can that be? So many of these things, they make total sense now, but they made no sense before. When you surrender to your enemy, or you surrender to anything, the enemy isn't anything separate from you. It is you. So when you surrender to yourself, let's put it that way, you are with God. Period. That's just how it is. There is only you. So when the enemy is what we perceive to be the enemy, there really is no enemy. The enemy is all in your head. It's the thoughts that we just talked about. So when you surrender to those, you really realize it all. And so in the surrender is where you find God. The surrender is where you find God. In the hands of your enemy, you are surrendered to God. Sit with that for a moment. Okay, so accept failure. Try it, discover it. And so when you really go and delve into failure, when you delve into exhaustion, into just giving up, surrendering, what you notice is that you melt, you dissolve, you evaporate into water. So the nothingness that you're seeking, the experience of the void, is what you experience as you accept and you go into this failure, into this exhaustion, into the surrender, into the arms of God, which is right there with you all along. You evaporate. You evaporate. So the only other things that I wrote down is some of the things that can happen when we surrender. What happens after we surrender? So what happens is a release of control. Surrendering involves letting go of control. So releasing the control really alleviates like stress, anxiety. That's one of the things you'll see and you hear reported, is that when there's a surrender, there's this kind of dropping of the tension, of the constriction. That's right here, the stress, anxiety. The next thing that happens is acceptance. Surrendering involves accepting things as they are. So you stop judging things. You stop pointing this one out for being that way, this one out for being bad, for wrong, for immoral, for sinner. You stop pointing people out. You stop pointing things out. You stop separating things. You accept things as they are. So a whole new energy switches up in you. The next thing that happens is a connection with something greater. You experience what everybody's talked about as God. Doesn't matter if you had been an atheist all of your life. With this experience of surrender, you will experience this energy of a greater power. And it's love. It's something that's always been here. It's something greater. It is a part of you. And when you experience it, you can sometimes experience it outside of yourself. But what's really happening is it's part of you. It's always been part of you. So you're going to experience that. Even for those that have never experienced or thought of God, they will experience this higher connection of some kind within themselves or within whatever. Sometimes people identify it, like I say, outside. Vulnerability and authenticity. It's going to be a big shift. You're no longer going to be people pleasing. It's not going to be about that anymore. It's going to be about being authentic, being vulnerable, sharing with others because you care, because you are them. Forgiveness. Surrendering involves letting go resentments and this internal forgiveness towards yourself and towards others. So another thing that you gain is kind of like this inner peace, that you always feel in peace and inner connection and compassion with others. You feel this connection with others. So it's something that just kind of naturally happens as we surrender. There's just nothing more that's hanging on to life or wanting anything. It's surrendered, so it's just allowing life. It's in flow. It's in the feminine now. So some of the other things that I wrote was community support. Could be helpful. So when we have this shift, finding other people that have gone through similar things can be helpful, because a lot of different things happen that a lot of people have never really talked about. At least I had never heard of anything like this. So it could be helpful to find a good group to be community support for you. So that's basically what I wrote. It's kind of just going around and round in circles about surrender. Now, so surrender is very simple. It just really is. Just let it go. Just like the Frozen movie. Let it go, let it go. So let it go. Whatever it is that you're hanging on to right now, whatever fight you're still in, whatever you're still carrying from the past, from others, from whoever, whatever is still kind of nagging and right there, and kind of this sore spot on you, let it go, let it go, let it go. That's all you have to do. And as you let it go, you'll notice that you're dissolving. You're turning into that water. You're turning into that vapor. You're dissolving into nothingness. And so in doing so, you become everything. And so you gain everything in that. So dissolve into nothing so that you can be everything and you can experience life from its true nature. You've always known you aren't this little tiny human. There's always been so much more to you, and you've known that. Surrender this. Let it go. Step into your divinity right now. I want to share one more quote with you before we close here, and then I have some updates and announcements here to close. So this is a quote by Rumi. He's a Persian mystical spiritual teacher. And so this is what he says. He says, try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. And do not worry that your life is turning upside down. How do you know that the side you are used to is better than the one that is to come? How do you know? That's the question. How do you know? Why are you so attached to this life you're living right now? Why are you fighting so hard to keep it? Why are you struggling so bad for something that you know isn't right for you? Why are you doing that? How do you know that the life that you have coming for you as you surrender isn't so much greater than this one? It's got divine intelligence in it. What makes you think that your little pea-sized brain has all of the intelligence that it could do so much more than the divine intelligence that's already trying to guide you? Allow it. Release. Surrender. Let it go. Let life lead. Aren't you tired? Let go. Let your body rest. Let your mind rest. Let life do this for you. As we close here, I just wanted to share some more updates. If you're new here and you like this sort of content, consider subscribing to my channel and hit that notification bell to get my updates and things of when I post new videos. We've just started our new unconditional course that started 10/10, and I'm so happy to have everybody there. It is going amazing, and I'm so happy to have that group on board. We will be continuing on with the unconditional course. This will be a staple course, and so I will be starting the early bird specials again for the unconditional course. Now, this course is set to begin January 1st. This is another portal for openings. So I hope that you'll join me. So if you're interested, go ahead and just email me at schoolofscarlet@gmail.com, and I'll have that information down below in the description and comment section as well. I also have the new release of my new book, Euphoria, coming out December 10th. I'm doing author signed copies, so I'm taking pre-orders for those. And so if you would like to have a pre-ordered copy of a signed copy, you can click a link that I have in the description and in the comments. I also have this stuff in my community tab. If you haven't been to the community tab, it is a tab in the YouTube area under my channel page, and I post in there things like this, like the link to buy that pre-ordered book. I post things about the course, and I always post like quotes and things that I find heartfelt, and I find that I want to share them with you. So check that out there for all of these updates and things there to come. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope y'all have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you so much.